Hey everybody, I'm Eric Wilson and I work for the U.S. Coast Guard as a cybersecurity advisor for the Captain of the Port Authority for Greater Puget Sound. And most importantly, I happen to be a neighbor of Dan Thomas. So Dan asked me to speak about cybercrime and some of the topics from your guys' course. So he shared slides from the book, and I read them over. And in doing so, I have to say that cybercrime generally is incredibly complex, especially when you try to define it using labels, which is really what the book is trying to do here. The book did a good job with a lot of the information, but a few things I feel they might have got wrong, and so we can cover that here in a little bit. But within the construct of the book, it does a really good job of labeling what is cybercrime, especially as we look at how we want to categorize it. And they broke it down into the three fields where, yes, cyber piracy is a crime, right? Yes, cyber trespass is a crime. Yes, cyber vandalism is a crime. However, in the criminal justice system and in the people that I work with, like the cyber task force for the FBI, there's a whole lot more things that get labeled as cybercrime as we deal with it on a daily basis. And just labeling it allows us to be able to categorize it. However, the crime that might be that someone might have violated goes well beyond what's listed in the book as those three specific fields of cybercrime. Basically, as we define it, right, the crime is just basically a violation of the written statute or the law. But once principal elements of that crime include electronic, digital, network components, we add the term cyber to it. Again, it's just a label or a classification so that we can categorize it and use resources to investigate or prosecute it. It doesn't change the actual law as is written or the violation of that law. And really, probably the most important thing is to be able to categorize it within the cyber sort of definition is we can use different tools, different people for the investigation, how evidence gets collected, and even specifically who will be doing the investigation. The example being the people that I work with at the Cyber Task Force of the FBI, they work with all kinds of crime, but specifically for the data and forensics collection within cyber. Just to give an example, the crime of embezzlement. Anybody can steal from their company, and you can do it not cyber related. However, when you use a computer to go into a network, maybe into a company's billing system, and you take money from it, the crime is still embezzlement. But the way that it would be investigated and forensically the case would be built around it would be using the skill sets of a cyber professional to collect that information and eventually prosecute. So we can categorize it as cybercrime, even though the actual crime isn't listed as cyber. It's just the criminal element of embezzlement. And if you want to go into further detail, I would really recommend checking out the IC3 website through the FBI.gov's homepage. The IC3 is the Internet Crime Complaint Center, where individuals and organizations can submit cyber or internet-related crimes to the FBI for investigation. And every year they put out a report on what is, sort of the current trends within cybercrime, and sort of different than the way the book categorizes it. The top three within the IC3 report, just as last year, were fraud, extortion, and breach of data. So we can't really directly cross-correlate or connect those to the three categories that the book says. So, I mean, really, if you look at those labels and you look at those definitions, it goes well beyond sort of the scope of what the book tries to define within those three fields. However, keep in mind that even following the book labels, there are some crimes that are only cyber crimes. Like 18 USC 1030, which is the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. You can only do that with a computer. So it would fall under the book's sort of strict three categories of what is cybercrime. And then sort of to wrap up, one of the things that I specifically noticed and I sort of took offense to is in the book, right there in the first section of the chapter, it calls out the CEH certification, and CEH stands for Certified Ethical Hacking. And the ethical component of the CEH certification specifically says what you can and can't do with that level of training once you graduate and receive your certification. And in the book, it specifically calls out that a person with CEH training it would be prescribed the tools of counter hacking and even preemptive strikes against someone else, which is completely in violation of what the CEH training specifically requires, where CEH training teaches a cyber professional or an IT professional the skills and information on how hackers get into networks and what they do to exploit a network in order to infiltrate or breach it. So if you get that training is specifically and only to be used within your organization to defensively build a protection against that kind of skill set. It is not for preemptive strikes and using to hack an adversary or another organization. So that was completely wrong. And I definitely took a little bit of offense to it. Dan also asked that I wrap up with a possible ethics question. And I would say from my perspective within the maritime community, and then also from my work with the Cyber Task Force, one of the biggest sort of ethical dilemmas that we face today really falls on what happens if you as a company were to get hacked or were to have cyber crime, happen to you, is the question of reporting, where the government wants you to report, and often you're required to report. However, an organization may not want to because of their fear of losing, financial backing, losing customers, faith in your organization, and as well just showing, that you might be weak on your cybersecurity. So it's one of the things that a lot of organizations face on a daily basis if they were to be subjected to a cyber event, whether or not they should report it. So I think that brings up a really good sort of ethical question on that. So with that said, thanks.
So who paid Canvas as a ransom?
I can't say. I can't divulge that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.